What's up? My name is Josiah Haken, and I've been working with homeless folks for over a decade. I'm convinced that one of the biggest reasons we have not been able to solve the homelessness crisis in our country is because we fundamentally do not understand why it happens or what or can be done about it. In this podcast, I'm going to interview friends of mine who have experienced homelessness firsthand, experts who have spent years of their lives trying to provide services and resources to their unhoused neighbors, and advocates and theologians who will help us think differently about the issue altogether. You are not going to agree with everyone I interview on this podcast. You may not even agree with me, and that is okay. Let's throw out our assumptions and consider the possibility that maybe there is more to this story than we previously thought. Welcome to the Neighbors with No Doors podcast. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, I am here with my very dear friend and someone who I admire beyond words that I can probably use in public because I just feel so strongly about how amazing she is. We are here with my friend Detra Thomas. Detra, thank you so much for taking a few minutes to share your experience and your story with me. I will just confess right up front, this is the first podcast interview I'm doing, and so I have no clue what I'm doing, but I knew it had to involve Detra in some way. Detra, thank you so much for joining me here on this podcast.
I am honored that you would ask, and anytime I spend with you is a joy and exciting, and I'm honored, just honored to be here. Thank you.
Amazing. So our goal here is to, with this podcast is to help educate people on the realities of homelessness and also equip them and empower them to do something about it, right?
Okay.
So I'm going to ask, all my guests and all the people that I get the pleasure of chatting with a couple of questions that because I want to get people's feedback on a couple of things before we even get into the topic. So Detra, my first question is for you. What was your first introduction to just the reality of homelessness in general, even as a kid or as a young adult or whatever? Like when you think back to your life, what was your first memory or your first introduction to the reality of homelessness?
We were in Dallas, Texas, the man I was married to and our children, and we were doing a conference there. We were downtown Dallas at this conference center, and as we drove, there on the sidewalk were men and women sound asleep in the middle of the day on pieces of cardboard. And you could tell some were couples by the way that they were together, just maybe holding hands, spooning or whatever. And it was sobering, I should say. It was a somber experience. It hurt, it made me hurt inside to see that level of disregard for what was going on in life to meet their needs for sleep and do it in a very hot time of day on a piece of cardboard.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think so many people can relate to that. I mean, right now in our country, we're seeing homelessness become more and more visible as people are, in numbers in California, especially in tent encampments and on the West Coast and in New York City, where we operate, we see people, around Penn Station all the time. And it's becoming a much, it feels anyway that it's becoming much more visible. So I know a lot of people can relate to that feeling of like seeing people sleeping outside and feeling that sort of ache and sadness around the issue. And I mean, obviously we're going to get into your story and how you, kind of got from this place of seeing people sleeping outside to actually being in a position where that could have been you or would have been you. And so, and I can't wait to hear your story again and kind of how your journey progressed. But another question I have for you is if you, Detra, could convince everyone listening to this podcast about one thing that society gets wrong about homelessness or those who experience it, what would you say? What would you say that if you knew it was going to convince everyone listening about one thing that society gets wrong about homelessness?
That one size fits all.
Mm.
You know how you can order a piece of clothing and, particularly if you're a woman, it says one size fits all baloney. Baloney. It may fit most everybody, but there are the ones who are too tiny that it swallows, and there are the ones who are way too big and it, you know, morphs to their body. One size fits all is the biggest lie I know of.
Once I wow, so good. Oh my goodness, I'm so that's such so good. And then the last question before we get into your, again, your story and your journey is, what is one practical thing that you do on a regular or semi-regular basis to help your homeless neighbors, the people that you see in your in where you live and where you work?
I live in West Harlem and I just pay attention. I try to look around and pay attention. And I've um, had the opportunity to be involved, I guess you would say, with four homeless people here where I live. One was my son and his wife brought my belongings from Arkansas. I finally got my own apartment. And so they brought my things in storage. I've been there 4 years. And I went down to the laundromat and asked if I could, pay some help to come help unload the truck. And the woman there translate, or she got a man in the laundromat to translate. He gave me his number. He said, "Give me 20 minutes notice." I gave him 20 minutes notice. My apartment, they knocked at my door. I opened it up, and it was not the man who had said he would come with a helper. It was a man and a woman, a very tall, thin woman, and a very short, heavier man. And I was like, oh my goodness. Those two people worked so hard and we got the truck unloaded. I told the man what I had to pay. My son paid some more. We hired them to come back the next day. They ended up coming to my show that night. And in the course of the day, we asked a few questions. They told us they were homeless. So what I would do, I had their number. I would say, "Hey, I have this job. This is what I'm willing to pay. Would you like to?" So I had interaction with them for a while, and then I no longer they no longer respond.
Mm.
And then there have been a man just living on the street. The restaurants will have the little shelter.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed that he was sleeping out there and he would have his sleeping bag. And then the little shelter, restaurant would open the evening. He would be gone. And I observed this for a while. He always had a book. And so a lot of mornings I would go sit in the middle of Broadway and just kind of take in the morning. And one day I noticed him observing me and I thought he's going to come talk to me. And he did. So I learned his name and a little bit about him. I offered to take him to one of your places in Harlem. Didn't work out, but I see him from time to time. He's now in a shelter. He has a job. So I just kind of keep tabs on how he's doing.
Yeah.
And then we had another lady just standing outside the little bodega here, and she was open. She wasn't begging for money, but she was open. And I just said hello, good morning, to see how her reception was and how she was doing with her personal space, and ended up connecting her with you. So I don't have a lot. I still don't have monetary things, but those are the things I do.
And I think, and that's my, so again, my prayer and my hope for this whole project, right, is to help people realize that you don't have to have a lot
Yeah.
to do a lot, right? Like
Right.
and even how we gauge what it means to do a lot. I think a
Right.
lot of times we assume that the scope of a problem determines our ability to get involved or solve that problem.
Mhm.
And so we think of homelessness as this huge problem. So we think, oh, I can't make a
Right.
difference. We got to leave that to the professionals. But in reality, there's something like, I love that you're seeing your homeless neighbors and engaging them, and then connecting them to me, and then helping our team is, and and I know there's people around the country who are doing the kind of work that we do, and there's lots of folks that could be connected if people took a little
Mhm.
more initiative. So I just want to say thank you to you for uh, continuing to get engaged in helping people right where they are. So, Detra, you have an incredible story. I know you know that, and I know that. But a lot of people that are maybe be listening don't know exactly what's your story. So I'd love for you to just share a little bit about, or what you're comfortable sharing about the kind of your life. Maybe we'll get to the homeless part and how that happened, but even just before the homeless part, Tell me a little bit about your life. Like, how did you, before you ended up without a place to stay in Lower Manhattan? Can you tell me a little bit about your life?
You mean when life was, quote, normal?
Normal, yes.
Yeah, quote, normal. This is going to be emotional. Back when life was, quote, normal, I was a pastor's wife in Arkansas. I had 7 children. I home educated them. In fact, we traveled in 16 states for 8 years. We did bluegrass, ventriloquism, chalk art, juggling, you know, crusades. We did bookstore openings. We did everything. We did everything. And we were a great team. We were a fantastic team. Um, and then we started planted a little church, and we did that for a few years. And um, so my life, in fact, I did a ministry. I ran a ministry for 4 years for homeless shelter. And I would have told you that I had this great marriage. I worked so hard in my marriage, and I would have told you I was happy. Um, anyway, that was my life, and it revolved around my children, my home, and the church. And I was a pastor's daughter, so that's all I ever knew.
That's all you knew.
All I knew.
And so then tell us about the transition. Like, looking back, like, you went from a suburban housewife to homeless in New York City. What happened? Like, what cracks did you fall through? What happened to lead to that transition?
Oh my goodness. That is, there's no single answer to that. And it wasn't, I woke up one morning and that's what it was.
You didn't
It
just voluntarily decide, I screw this whole suburban thing. I'm going to go be homeless in New York. That wasn't your thought process.
that's what I woke up one morning and thought sounded good to me. um, I'm going to give you an answer that is true, and it's a complex answer. But the transition for me was believing lies and putting my faith that they were true. And these lies were what men created to control and manipulate from an established and an accepted platform. And
Hmm,
there's many established and accepted platforms in life. So mine is not the only one, but mine was organized religion.
hmm,
And I was taught from birth certain lies, and one of those lies was, I was told as several times as a teenager by my dad, when you get married, you have to marry somebody that can conquer you because you're too strong. Now, and I was in a very ultra conservative religion, very patriarchal. I was taught from birth the woman is made for the man, and was drawn charts on how I had to stay under the man, and if I did not obey him and ask his permission and blessing for everything, that God would not bless me and he would not protect me. I took that seriously, very, very, very seriously. Um, and it cost me. It cost me everything. And so that was the transition. And then I went to this little tiny Christian college, you know, got married. And the week before I married, my mom, and I'm telling you, my mom meant well, but it was, Detra, just so you know, marriage is forever. If there's any problems, we'll take him, but we won't take you. And so, and plus another lie that I was taught was, you find a good Christian man and get married and you have the perfect marriage.
hmm.
And well, that's not true. Maybe it is, and I just didn't have a good Christian man. I don't know. But anyway, 3 weeks into my perfect marriage, I wanted out.
Hmm.
And, I look back, and here's another thing. I was taught, if a man hits a woman, that's wrong. There was no training. There was no conversations around passive aggressive sociopaths or psychopathic behavior.
Mhm.
None. None. That wasn't a consideration. That wasn't an allowance. That wasn't anything. And the submissive lie, and trust me, I am someone who doesn't have a problem with the word submission or doing it, because if we don't have traffic lights, we're going to have a lot of wrecks, you know?
Yeah, true story.
So, and I submit to traffic lights. So that's not the issue, you know?
Mhm.
It is the abuse of, it is the manipulation of, it is the controlling of, and it is using an established platform, in my case, the name of God, to hide neurosis
Mhm.
and not taking responsibility for yourself. And so that was the transition. And I will say, I begged for over 30 years for him to get help. I begged. And I finally, after 32 years, I went and talked to someone, because I never told anybody about my marriage. Because after all, I'm type A, I'm a hard worker. I read all the Nancy Drew and Hardy Boy books. I would figure this out, you know?
And it probably could have been seen as a betrayal of the power structure, right? Like, if you
Yeah.
dared to talk about your marriage
Yeah.
outside of the context of your husband, I mean, I just know that that environment
Yeah.
creates an environment. It creates a pattern of secrecy
Yeah.
and hides things because I'm just thinking, thinking out loud
It's
here, but
true.
yeah.
That's true. And right at the end, one man did ask me a question, and I said something about my husband. I said, he lies. And I got called into an office and ripped up one side and down the other, and accused of all manner of things that I hadn't even done for saying that. So yes, it would be a betrayal. And so I didn't. And so I went to a counselor who had helped me through some childhood things. And I said, I need to talk about my marriage. And the only way I've been able to articulate is I had Polaroid snapshots I had collected through the years. And you ever played that game, What's Wrong with This Picture? And I had these snapshots and I could not figure out what was wrong with the picture, but I knew something was wrong. And so as I told her, she had a question. She goes, Detra, if he was beating you, would you leave him? I said, oh yeah, of course. I mean, I am smart, after all. I know I would leave. Yes. And she said, well, you'd be better off if he beat the crap out of you every day. And even in my world, the word crap was
Yeah,
pretty, I was like,
it's like
oh my,
a
this is,
heathen therapist.
yeah, I thought this is bad. She's using the word crap. And she said, you'd be better off if he beat the crap out of you every day. The thing that happened for me was, how you can search and search and search for something, and when you find it, I knew that was the answer.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, the pain I had been hiding behind my, I'm going to be submissive and love and forgive him, and he's going to wake up and understand how mean he is and cruel, solidified into, oh my. And so here's how I dealt with that. I went home and apologized to him for being a bad wife. Because I realized I wasn't being loving and submissive. I was enabling. All of a sudden, the lens, focused, and I was like, oh, I thought I was being this submissive, godly wife, and I've enabled a monster.
Hmm.
And that was terrible for me. And I apologized to him. And I just told him, good old Detra's done doing this. Now let's see what you're going to do. I've been talking to you for over 30 years. And so brought in a mediator. I brought in an interventionist. They were horrified, but I watched them be charmed by his language and the name of God. And we, I'd done all I could do. And I
Mhm.
was being seen as, you're not forgiving and you have an anger problem. I didn't have an anger problem. Um, but I was to the point where if something doesn't happen, I knew I was gonna die, whether from a broken heart, and I'm not saying that lightly,
Yeah.
or from suicide. So, I'd been researching passive aggressive sociopaths. I had been reading, things, and I knew some more. And we're driving down the interstate. I've just been in the office of a man who's ripping me up one side and down the other because I'm not obeying this man, everything he says. And I don't know. The man I was married to took confidence from this man being rude to me. And as we're driving, he uttered the words, you just need to get on my side and work with me. And I snapped and I said, I've been on your side for 34 years. And I did something, I don't know. I'd been begging God, show me what to do. And I'd been told by four people, you got to get away from this man. How do you get away? How do
Mm.
you get away from everything you've ever known, you've ever believed, you've been taught? And I finally said, I don't know how to do this. God, you got to show me. And he uttered those words, and I said, I've been on your side. And I just looked at him and I said, you're a son of a bitch, which was far worse than crap. And I don't know who was more shocked, me or him.
Yeah.
And he pulled over and got in my face with his finger, yelling at me. And I don't know. It was like, this is it. And I felt like I just get out. So I got my purse, opened the door of my Suburban, and started walking down the interstate. And I said, God, I need help. It was dusky dark, and um, I said, I don't mind walking, but it'd be I could get hit out here, somebody not seeing me. And I looked up, and there was a car already pulled over, brake lights off, and a lady got out, got to me, ma'am, do you want to ride? And I said, I do. I was sobbing.
Mm.
And she said, well, God said to stop and pick you up. And I said, I told him I needed help. And I disappeared. With the help of two sons, I disappeared. One brought me to New York. He lived in New York. I would never have come to New York for love nor money. Never, never. And I was with him a year, and they moved with a job to Albuquerque. And I was like, you know what? There comes a time when I got to figure this out. And the other son in Arkansas wanted me to come live with him, but he lived in the town where I was born. I married, went to the college. It wouldn't have mattered. I would
Yeah.
have had this emotional drama of, oh, she's the pastor's wife that ran away. And I knew it would kill me. So, with for a couple of months with some friends' help, I rented a room for really, really cheap till I could figure out something, and um, ended up in a homeless shelter in New York.
And looking back, I'm just wondering if what are some things that maybe you took for granted before that homeless shelter experience. Like I'm just like leading up to that season. I know you were employed, right? You were working.
Yeah,
Um, uh, I believe it was Starbucks, right? You were
yeah,
working. Um, I mean, we both have that in common. I worked at Starbucks for about 9 months or so,
yeah.
um, and so I'm just like I just know the engagements you have at a Starbucks and the engagements you have is as a pastor's wife and mother and suburban like. And I'm just wondering, as you were, some things, if there's anything that comes to mind in terms of when you were in that shelter, sort of just some things that you just never really thought of, or things that you just never occurred to you before that experience.
Um, I lived in the shelter 4 months, and there were a lot of things. One, freedom to you know live your life, but um,
Tell me,
one was
sorry,
go
tell
ahead.
me a little bit about that, because I think a lot of people don't understand. They think that a shelter is like a hotel, or they think that like a lot of times people see someone on the street and they ask the question, well, why don't they just go into a shelter?
Yeah,
What's wrong? And I think it's important what you just said, like the lack of freedom.
yeah.
So maybe we even pause and just talk there a little bit. Like what were some of the realities of being in a shelter that most people don't think about?
Well, for this one that I ended up, and some shelters would not take me because I had a job and I had to be there at 5 in the morning. And the fact that homeless shelters would tell me to give up my job or that I couldn't, and it wasn't one, it was more than one, which was crazy to me. I was like, I have a job, and I'm trying not to be homeless anymore. But this one that I was in had 30 women in one room. And so you had to check in between 4 and 4:25 every afternoon unless you could prove that you were working. And when you checked in, you were in lockdown, and then for us women, we had to walk in a straight line. I kid you not, line up like kindergartners to go upstairs to the room where we transitioned to getting our things out of, our suitcase that we would need for the night, locking. You had to lock up all your possessions. I understand, so they wouldn't be stolen, but still, you forget something, you're out of luck. And then we had to walk in a straight line down to eat. And then we had to walk in a straight line back up to our room. Now, if you chose, and then we had to be, our names taken to get a shower. Um, you were timed for showers. You had 10 minutes to get undressed, shower, clean the shower, and get out. And I didn't think that was possible. Guess what? I learned. I learned.
I bet you did.
Yes, I did. And I want to pause here just a moment and tell you how I learned to be creative. In my 4 months, we had to call the police many times to come haul women out, that it wasn't going well. And one night a lady checked in, it wasn't going well. And I was on the bottom bunk, she was on the top bunk, and she was on the top bunk filming everybody, throwing things, cursing. They had to call the police. Anyway, it became a real deal. And here's what I thought of. Everyone's occupied. No one's guarding the showers. No one's timing. I'm going to go get a shower. I had a 20-minute luxurious shower. And I put a guard at the door and I said, keep me updated on the progress. You got to
that's
get creative.
that's brilliant. What a
So, but you're on lockdown. Now, if you chose to go to chapel, after chapel, you could go outside and stand for 10 minutes. It was called the smoke break. And I determined I would buy cigarettes and a lighter if I needed to. But that was the only fresh air you got.
yeah,
And that was important to me. And I would go
yeah.
stand out there for 10 minutes. And then you're on lockdown. And then fortunately, I had a job and I had to leave early, so a guard would wake me up at 3:20 in the morning. I guess 3 o'clock, and I would leave by 3:40. The other women, I never stayed. Even my days off, I didn't tell anybody it was my day off. I got up and got out. But at a certain time, they have wake up and they've got 45 minutes. All showers are done the night before to get their clothes together. And if you didn't have a job, you had to carry your suitcase with you every day. They had to be out of the shelter by 7:45, not allowed to come back in till 4. It is it is it's horrendous.
Yeah, best case scenario. I mean, even if we're painting with the rosiest of colors, right? Is
Yeah,
it's restrictive. That's why the word freedom. I mean,
yeah.
I talk to people all the time who tell me that they actually prefer jail to the shelter because at least in jail, when someone wanted to hurt you, they would move you to a different cell block.
Oh,
Whereas in a shelter, you were like,
yeah,
well, you don't have to be here. So if someone wants to hurt you, then you're just on your own. Um, and it's just something that I think a lot of people need to, again, come
yeah,
to come to grips with. This is reality for people. Like
yeah,
the, I tell people a lot of times that people don't choose to sleep in the street; they choose not to sleep in shelters, and
yeah,
and there's legitimate reasons for that. So I thought it was really. Thank you so much for sharing because I think it's just really helpful for people to remember because I know that I've talked to a lot of people. Why don't they just go into a shelter? Well,
yeah,
it's not what you think. And
yeah. At the shelter I was at, there were only 30 beds for women unless it was below 32, and then there were mats everywhere. But so, let's say 35 women show up, which in most nights more than 30 women showed up. Now I had a job, I had a guaranteed bed. I don't know what I would have done if I didn't. But the rest of the women were in a lottery. Literally, their name goes in a bowl. And if there's 35 women, five names are drawn, and those women are on the streets for the night.
yeah,
And I, I don't know, but what it would be easier to live on the streets than every night to be in the lottery and not know.
yeah,
I cried so many nights at women I'd grown to love that were just out on the streets. And the
yeah,
next, I would say, "What did you do? What did you do?"
yeah,
And they would tell me it was
yeah,
it's an emotional roller coaster that's devastating.
yeah. And tell me a little bit about the concept of time. Because again, I know like you said you were in the shelter for 4 months. Is that?
Yeah.
And I guarantee, just because I know you and I've been around this world, right? I've been done this work long enough now to know that, you know, one day, 2 nights without a steady private bed to sleep in, that's shelter, that's protected from the elements, like it's like your sleep, like even the sleep, I know, like I tell people a lot, like sleep
Hmm.
is like, I think the Geneva Convention says makes sleep like makes like sleep deprivation is torture. It's actually
Yeah.
torture. I think it's a
Yeah.
war crime actually to keep
Yeah.
people awake.
Yeah.
And then when people don't have a place to stay, and it can really mess with your concept of time. So I'm just wondering if you can share a little bit about even like 4 months. I know there's one person out there probably who's going to hear this be like, well, 4 months, that's not so bad, but which is nuts. Like again, that's not to pick on the person who's thinking that. I am, but tell us a bit about what that experience did in terms of your ability to process time and life in general with during that season.
I guess I would put it in terms of this. When I, two friends kept my extra clothing, and I was allowed to take a little suitcase and my purse into the shelter. When I walked through those doors, I had no idea it was going to be 4 months. The concept of time was it's infinity in front of me of, and when I walked in that door, I walked in knowing that this may be the end.
Hmm.
And so I didn't have the timeline of 4 months. I can look back now and go, okay, 4 months, I did it. But when you go in, you don't know, and there's no clear path. There's no steps. There's no method. There's no, you do this for so many days, you get this. There's no reward if you're good. And I like being good and getting a reward. There was none of that. It was just, oh, you're here. They guaranteed a bed for 3 months. Now they were gracious and extended it another month for me. But I did fill out paperwork. There was a situation, I can't remember the name of the place, but if I could have gone there for a year and this very low rent, and I could have had my own bedroom but shared a bathroom, and there was a bed, and it was so exciting. One of the other women had moved there, and the social worker, the shelter, we filled it all. It was pages and pages and pages. And that bed went to an employee's relative,
Hmm.
and I lost it. I don't even want to go there to say what that did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It,
But but the
Go ahead.
concept of no time and you don't know leaves you on the edge of an emotion that you have to consciously make the choice. I'm not going to fall off the edge today. Maybe tomorrow, but today I'm going to do this.
It's incredible that you. So this is what I thought of when you described, and I think it's so perfect. Like I can't thank you enough for being able to describe, like, just your gift to be able to describe and put into words what I think, because what you're describing in terms of the time actually made me think of a time when I was doing like a 60-mile portage in Canada at a lake, at a Algonquin National Park. Did this where you have to carry your canoe on your back for over the land, and then you'd get in the canoe and you'd row.
Mhm.
And I remember one stretch where it was like a 3.5 mile portage where you had to put everything on your back, and my friend and I were like, we're gonna, instead of trading places, we're gonna do this the whole way each. We're gonna carry someone else's canoe, and we're gonna do this each our whole way. And I remember just starting out and just lugging this canoe on my back, and I remember not knowing how far I had gone. I
Yeah.
couldn't, because there were no mile markers, there were no indications of you've gone, halfway there. And I just remember just the anxiety, and like once you start, that pack started weighing
Yeah.
down on me, and the canoe is rubbing into my neck, and it's tolerable if you think there's an end in sight. You can
Right.
kind of put up with it. But if you
Mhm.
have no clue if you've gone 100 yards or two and a half
Mhm.
miles, it's an eternity. I mean, I just
Yeah.
remember that 3 mile stretch. So that's immediately what I thought of when you described it, because I think it's so brilliant that, yeah, without knowing, without an end in sight, it is. And it's whether you're there 4 days or 4 months or four
Yeah.
years, it, it feels like an eternity because you have no clue how far you've gone or how much farther you have to go.
Sure.
So how did you survive? Like I guess that's the other question, is like, what kept you going? You just said you took it one day, each day you're like, today's not the day I'm going to give up. But like, what motivated you? How did you make it?
Um, Prayer. Even though I do not go to church anymore, okay? I really have had my fill of organized religion. I have not lost my faith in a one true living God that's not boxed into something and someone tells me what to do to make him happy. And I'm a woman of prayer, and I believe down to my 10 red piggies that he has a way and a plan and that he opens doors. That being said, I'd been there about a week and a half and I knew I wasn't going to survive unless I could write. And so by this time I had a second job and it happened to be Paper Source. So now I'm working two jobs and I got a discount and I went and found a journal that was blue, my favorite color. And on the front in gold letters, it says, "Hello, beautiful," in
Hmm.
script. And I needed that word in my life because there was nothing beautiful about my life. And I began to write. And in the course of the 4 months, I wrote over 300 handwritten pages of the angst, the trauma, the never having a private moment, the having to call my son by sitting in a doorway on Smith Street and a business that nobody was going to be going in and out the door and having a conversation and people on the street going by and listening to it. It I made it, and then I had some friends, um, who cheered me up, and they knew, that I was having a hard time. And one in particular, I could walk in the door, and he'd go, "Wow, we're going to go get some fries today," And so it was smiles, and I just knew that God had made me for a reason, and it wasn't to give up.
Hmm.
I've argued with him about that many days. I'm going to be honest. I'm not trying to say that was done easily for me. Um, And I think also I don't know how to give up. I've tried some days and I get bored with it. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to go do something. But prayer and just the little things. And it wasn't prayers of demanding that I get out of the shelter, prayers that God do things my way, prayers that this happened. It was, God, I need light for today. What today? And the other thing was just loving on everybody else. I mean, I was a Starbucks barista and an opener, and those people didn't know. They didn't know anything. I loved them coming in every morning for their caffeine. I knew all their names, I knew their drinks, I knew their families, and I got to love on people. That kept me going.
Yeah,
That kept me going.
absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, I remember talking to you through that season, and again, that's why it's no exaggeration for me to say that you inspire me, and you're just the. I mean, I remember you telling me you like picked up boxing, like or like tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I've mentioned I had childhood trauma. It was intense childhood trauma. And then, finding out it wasn't just that. I thought my childhood trauma was kind of making things bad in my marriage. It come to find out, the marriage was the whole thing in itself. So I decided that if I could do the little speed bag, the little bag that hangs from the
Yep,
frame,
the one
because,
that Rocky uses, right?
right. And you that's not one where you just go crazy and slug it. That one takes symmetry, it takes rhythm, it takes a romance to keep that going. But I thought I really need to hit something, and I didn't want to be a wild and crazy woman, but I thought if I could do that, I could hit but while staying controlled. And one day at the shelter, a counselor goes, we were all in the big chapel watching Sunday football, and he said, "Detra, do you like football?" I said, "Oh, I love a Hail Mary pass in the end zone to win the game." And I said, "Do you like football?" He goes, "I like boxing." And I said, "Oh my goodness, I want to do the speed bag." And he goes, "Deidre, there's a boxing gym a few blocks away." And so he brought a flyer. And I thought, I want to go see about the speed bag. I went in. I don't know if anyone like me had ever walked in that boxing gym. And there were two men sparring in the ring, and there was a guy at the desk. And, he kind of did this and, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Do you have a speed bag?" And again, he kind of did a double take it. He goes, "We have everything but the speed bag." So he gives me a tour of the gym. Meanwhile, the men sparring keep getting my attention. And the odd thing was they keep triggering deep emotion. And the man giving me the tour was very gentlemanly. And I would turn aside, try to get the sobs under control. And he didn't say anything till we got back to the desk. And he said, if you don't mind me asking, why a speed bag? I said, a lot of abuse. He said, have you considered taking boxing? I said, as in hit somebody? And I was horrified. And he said, as in learning self defense. And so for $40, I could take a trial class. And I went back and I pondered on this and I thought, you know what? I don't have much money, but the thought of raising my hand to defend myself, I would start sobbing thinking about it. I thought I need to go face the fear. I wasn't able to defend myself as a child.
Hmm. Or
And
as
I'm
or as a wife.
or as a wife, and I don't need to fall apart thinking even lifting my hand. So I thought I'm going to go pay the $40, face the fear, get this over with, move on in life. So went in and paid my $40, and then the thing was I had nothing to wear for a boxing class. And I told the women at the shelter, and they dressed me for my little trial thing. And one of them went to the closet and got a pair of men's swimming trunks that so old, dilapidated, Velcro, lace up. I could barely get myself in it. And she brought this scoop neck T-shirt that molded, and I was like, "Oh my!" And the thing is, the women made me put it on and go the whole circle between all the bunk beds, like a fashion
Like a
runway.
fashion show.
Yeah. Detra, I said, I cannot wear this in a boxing gym. I'm not going to wear a t-shirt molded to me. So when I'm dug around her suitcase and got out a very thick black cotton oversized t-shirt, the owner of the gym has told me I will never forget what you wore in here that first day. And I wore my work black shoes from Starbucks. And I went in, my lesson was with the owner of the gym. He asked me three questions. Where are you from, kid? Well, I'm from Arkansas. What's your worst fear, kid? Lifting my hand to defend myself. What do you think's going to happen? I'm going to be in the floor crying. He said, go get dressed. I'm about to change your life. And we had our lesson, and this man is intuitive. He asked questions. He tried his best to make me sob and cry. He had a white towel, and anytime he'd say something and a tear would trickle, he'd hand me the towel. I said, I don't need it. He said, I'm going to make you cry. I said, not today, you're not. But at the end of it, he's like, kid, when you coming back? And I wasn't going to tell him I was in shelter. I said, well, and he turned and yelled at the woman on the desk. He said, put the kid's name on the list, give her a t-shirt. And he turned around and he said, you're mine. He
Huh.
said, you're behind the eight ball. I'm going to teach you how to do this. Get your phone. Here's my number. You're going to call me and we're going to get you. And for 9 months, three men trained me and I learned how to box and, defend myself.
That's that's so amazing. That makes me so happy. I can't even get the smile to leave my face. I'm so happy about that story. All right. I know again, you and I could probably talk for hours. So tell us about how did you get, so the transition then from the shelter towards the journey towards stability and housing and, yeah, what happened there? What changed?
Two Starbucks customers, two different women, asked me identical two questions. One changed my life physically, one changed my life emotionally. The question was this: Detra, do you live in the area? And I said, well, I used to. I lived in Carroll Gardens with my son and his wife for a year. Next question: where do you live now? And I get asked a lot of questions in New York, but people don't generally ask, where do you live? That's just not a question they ask. And the first time I said, I live in a homeless shelter. She's like, you do not. I said, well, I do. Right now, you're in a homeless shelter. I said, yes. She ran out of the store crying, but what I realized was my address didn't define me,
Hmm.
which led me to the next thought of why was I letting from my childhood and the man I married and other things define me? And I was. So that helped me to reframe who I was and realize that I decide who I am. And the lady asked me same two questions, and I was in a homeless shelter, and she's like, Detra, can I ask you questions? And I said, sure. And so then the last one was, can my husband and I meet with you tomorrow when you get off work? They did. And he's like, Detra, can I ask questions? I said, look, I don't go around telling it, but ask what you want. He asked personal questions. He asked financial questions. And when we were done, he said, Detra, we just know you as our barista, but we love you. And we cannot even imagine. And so this is what we want to do. We want to give you this many hundreds of dollars a month for 6 months. We want to help you get out. We don't ever want to be paid back. And we want to invest in you. And that is how I was able to get out of the shelter. And I looked at a couple of rooms, and well, one lady wouldn't take me because I didn't speak a little bit of Polish, which I thought was interesting.
That's an odd discrimination category.
Yeah, it really was. It never mind. It just wasn't the place for me. And so I had done one music show by this time, and I have five guys who play in my band. And the drummer had bought an apartment in Harlem and knew I was in a shelter. Because teacher, come out here and look. And he travels with a big band, and he said, I'm going to rent to somebody. I'd rather rent to you than a college student who's going to trash my place while I'm gone. And so, with what I was making and with what they were going to give me, I was able to move in and rent a room for him for 2.5 years, is what I did.
Hmm.
Yeah. And eventually, I was working 4 jobs, 7 days a week. I was getting up at 2 o'clock in the morning. I start working for the train here in Harlem at 3 in the morning so I could be in Brooklyn, start my job at 5. And I have to be early. And with the train situation, I was there very early. But yeah. And little by little, and then I needed a full-time job, and nobody would give me an interview. I sent out resumes. Nobody. I was 55 at that time. Nobody's gonna in New York. They got kids who they can pay cheap. They're not going to hire a 55-year-old. And I think in their mind, she's ready to retire. They didn't know I had nothing.
Yeah.
I'm never going to retire. I'm just going to nasty away, So they're like, we're not going to hire her. And I'm like, I'm a pretty safe bet. I'm desperate. I'm working. But eventually I realized that all my jobs were coming from my Starbucks customers who knew my work ethic, who
Yeah.
saw me, who knew my attitude. And so I decided to tell a few of them I needed a full-time job, had no idea what they did for a living, told one of my favorite customers and had no idea where he worked, gave me a business card. Long story short, he's the global CEO of where I work now. And he said, I took your resume to HR and I just said, I have an unorthodox candidate. And that's my favorite description of me to this day. I love it.
Yeah, I'm totally gonna name this podcast the Unorthodox Candidate. That's totally gonna be the name. So, amazing. Like I said, I know I could just sit here and listen for hours, but I guess one last question I would ask, um, and I hopefully maybe I'll even have you back and we'll have a part two and keep talking because this is just so much fun. But what are looking back now and now looking back and now then looking ahead, what are some lessons that you carry with you from that time, from that season, and again, how can all of us do more to help um, people who are in crisis and help people move forward?
I think probably there were two big things learned in the shelter. One, I've told you about, an address doesn't define me. And
Mhm.
let's be honest, homelessness is a stench, okay? And to most people, it has a terrible stench and they don't want it anywhere near them. And I was living it. And I knew how people felt about it. In fact, the shelter, the women would line up outside the wall. We weren't allowed to stand on this street. We had to line up on this other street, and the people passing by would look and shake their heads at the women there. And for a couple of months, I would not go get in that line. I would go down to a little grocery store, sit in the window, get a little some dollar snack or something, and I'd wait till time, and I would walk through the front door when it was time, as if you know I belonged there. But when I learned the lesson that I was not embarrassed to tell that woman I lived in the shelter and that it didn't define me, even though I was it was a real thing. You could see what homelessness people think. I thought, you know what? I am homeless right now, and I'm going to own it. And I'll never forget the first day that I went and stood in the line with my fellow sisters, and we were all homeless. And as I started that way, they looked up and they saw me coming, and it was like, "Oh, Detra, Detra, come stand by me, come stand by me," you know. And as the people passed, and looked at us and shook their heads and, whispered something to the person with them, I just smiled and stood proudly beside my sisters. It was what I was at that time, but I also knew it didn't define who and what I was, and it couldn't define who and what I was going to be.
Mhm.
And that was an important lesson for me. The other thing that is huge for me is sorrow is a heavy negative emotion. And I have watched sorrow destroy many people. Being a pastor's daughter, pastor's wife, I've watched what sorrow does and how they choose to incorporate it into their lives. I'm so sorry. You're
How
making
dare
me
you?
cry.
How dare you feel?
So, the thing I've learned is this: sorrow, the heavy negative emotion, when it's taken in with a closed heart and mind, it begins to fester, it builds up bacteria, and it leads to anger, bitterness, and revenge, which produces manipulation, controlling, and entitlement.
Hmm.
You owe me because I have this in my life. We're living in that world right now. But sorrow, when taken in with an open heart and mind, somehow that heavy negative emotion that you think is going to rip you inside, tear you up, shred you as it passes through the open heart and mind, it's not allowed to fester and build up all the bacteria. It somehow becomes a positive, and it matures, it deepens, it lets you have empathy. It allows you to see life differently in a way that's like getting trifocals. It's like going to the eye doctor and getting an eye exam and putting on, you know, and I wear trifocals. I remember
Hmm.
putting them on thinking, oh my goodness, I didn't know that was blurry. And I also have astigmatism, and it straightens things. So that's what it's like. And I'm able, with maturity and empathy, live in my world in a good way. So sorrow becomes positive. And then what happens is, since sorrow is not bottled up and festering, which take overwhelms you, when it's an open heart and mind, it then propels you to go through open
Hmm.
doors. It propels you to do something different. It propels you to think differently, to love differently. And it becomes a positive in your life, not a negative.
Hmm.
That was transforming for me, that I could carry this amount of sorrow, and it's more sorrow than I even want to admit at this time. And you can go on, you know, you can go on.
Amazing. Um, Thank you so much. I can't even begin to say how what it means to me to again have you share your story with me and help again. I think utilize even this is the redemptive power of even paying that forward and taking that sorrow and allowing it not just to be something that you're able to leverage for your own redemption, but now
Mhm.
it's even being passed on. It's actually being put forward to other people, and other people are going to be able to kind of grab hold of it and say, oh, I want that same redemption that Detra has.
Mhm.
And I know that there have been so many people. I know you've shared the story with a lot of people who know the organization that I work with, um, and we're just it's a gift every time you share your story. It is a gift to me. It's a gift to others um, who need the perspective and again the healing that you've gone through, that you've earned. um, that we kind of get to sort of adopt. And it's a gift. So thank you for that gift. And just appreciate you so much. And I can't wait to share this story with, and parts of the story with so many people.
Well, Josiah, the gift for me has been knowing you. You know, when we were introduced, I was desperate. I had no idea, and I was asking questions, and someone put me in touch with you. That first meeting, I was late, 5 minutes late, and in my world, that's an hour late, disrespectful. I've learned now, New York time, 5 minutes is not considered late.
No,
Yeah,
not even
I,
close.
I was rattled. I have complex PTSD, and sweating is a way and I was drenched, and I entered that room just I didn't know if I was going to make it, and sit down at the table with you and Teresa, and your eyes, no judgment,
Hmm.
your smile, and you're just saying, "Tell me about it." And I would say, if you notice people in your neighborhood, smile and just casually say good morning, see the reception, how are you doing, see the reception, and maybe ask another question.
Yeah.
And that's what you taught me. And that's what you did when I was at the worst place in my life.
Hmm.
So thank you for teaching me.
It's my pleasure. Amazing. Thank you, Detra. I am so grateful that you took the time to listen to this episode of the Neighbors with No Doors podcast. I hope you found it helpful and empowering. Just so you know, I'm releasing a book that is also going to be called Neighbors with No Doors, and I would love for you to check it out. You can find it at neighborswithnodoors.com. You can like our Facebook page or follow along on Instagram and Twitter. I'd like to thank my producer, Rex Harson, for helping me put this together, as well as the many guests who gave me the gift of their time and their story. Have a great day. We'll see you next time.